Hey boys and girls, it's Mrs. Davis here at home with our second learning video that has to do with the difference between fiction and nonfiction. In our last video, we were reading some text features together and sorting them under the correct category. We know that books can be placed in categories fiction and nonfiction. So here's the list that we created yesterday for each of those categories. We were thinking about the fact that fiction stories were made up, they were telling us a story, they were meant to entertain us, and that fiction stories have a beginning, middle, and an ending, and so therefore it is so important for us to be able to read those stories in order because they're in a sequence of events that would not be able to be understood unless we go in order, beginning, middle, and end. Fiction stories also contain characters, settings, problems, and solutions. And it's in those fiction books that we can see animals doing crazy things like talking and wearing clothes and walking on two legs when they're not supposed to be able to do that. We also found out that in nonfiction books, they have some very different text features. They're filled with true facts. They're meant to teach the reader something. They contain real photographs, and you can read these types of books in any order since they're just presenting facts. There was one feature that we placed in the middle. Can you remember why we did that? Hey, if you said because in fiction stories, they contain illustrations, but so do non-fiction texts. They can have illustrations in them as well. So we just put that feature in the middle. And yesterday, you were also given this little job, little assignment to go ahead and gather some of your books. And if you didn't have a collection at home, you could go online to Epic Books and browse there. You were having a book party. How did that go? I hope you just enjoyed just laying some books out and browsing through them. Our goal was to look for the different features in fiction and nonfiction, and maybe you even decided to sort your books and put them into categories on your own. That's a great idea. Now, today, we're going to be going forward in this study, one more day of thinking about fiction versus nonfiction. Now, if we were at school, we would be I would be able to give you this sheet. It says fiction versus nonfiction. However, since we are at home, well, we have to just sometimes make our own sheets, and we are well able to do that. So I went ahead and created on a piece of copy paper, I just created this chart, and that's what we're making. And I took my pencil, and first thing I did was to divide this paper into 2 equal parts. And then at the top, I labeled fiction and nonfiction. And I just drew a line here for the headings. And what the job says for us to do, at the top, the directions say, it says, what makes a text fictional? Give an example. And then this side says, what makes a text non-fictional? Give an example. An example, of course, is, well, it's one of these that we were working on yesterday. However, I was thinking, since you guys are really getting close to 2nd grade, I think we'd be able to not just give one example, but let's list 3, because you can see we have more than 3 in each category. And what I did to mark that, I put these little enlarged period dots. They're really called bullets if you're making a list on a chart. So I put 3 little bullets for each one, and you're going to give me 3 examples for each category. So 3 text features for fiction and 3 text features for nonfiction. That's job 1. Now job 2, again, we're having to solve some problems here since we're at home. I want you to flip your paper over and use the back side, and then we're going to create this little sheet on the back. Okay, I'm saving the planet Earth one piece of paper at a time by using the back side. So here's how we're going to set this paper up. At the top, you're going to write text title. So we're going to set our paper up, and then I'll tell you how you're going to fill this out. So go ahead and write that title and draw a line. Underneath that, the next part says my text, which you can put book there, same thing. My text is blank. And then finally, I know this because, and I drew, you know, several blanks there because that is going to be where you're going to be completing a sentence to explain. All right, here's how you're going to get to work on this sheet. You're going to select one of those books from your collection, or, you know, if you use Epic Books, that's totally fine too. Just select one book this time. So if I reached in my pile of books and I pulled Whales up, you're just going to be focusing on one for this activity. So I would go ahead, it says write the title. So I'm going to model that for you. So the name of the book I'm looking into is Whales. And I started that with a capital because it's a special name of the book. It says my text is, I've got to decide if this is fiction or nonfiction, and I'm going to label it as such, and I happen to know that's a nonfiction, so I'm going to write that down. Non meaning not. It's not fiction. Okay. And then I know this because that's where I'm going to look closer into that particular text. And I'm going to find a text feature that proves that it is nonfiction. And I definitely know this is nonfiction based on one of these features. This book contains real photographs. So that's how I'm going to complete that sentence. I know this because the book contains real photos. Period dot, because I'm completing my sentence. And of course, as always, when you're writing, if you are working with a word maybe you don't know how to spell, you can get help from a family member. That's totally fine. Or you can use your sound spelling. But then if you're writing like the word the, you know how to spell that. So you're going to spell that correctly. All right. Fiction versus nonfiction experts. You've got a few jobs that you're going to be working on. Going forward, as we continue our study, we're really going to start focusing in to nonfiction even more, because there are actually a few more features we want to touch on in our study, because once we become experts on the features of nonfiction, we're going to be taking that information and we're going to transfer it into some nonfiction writing. Once we get really familiar with what the difference is in the two types of reading materials and writing, ways to write, then we can actually go forward and write some nonfiction topics. I am so excited about doing that. All right. Now, you've got a lot to work on. So remember, you're creating your sheets and you are filling out the information that we have talked about. And of course, you're always taking pictures for me and sending me your great work. Okay, until our next learning video, have a good one.